In a recent interview with an executive of the industry group, the Professional Services Council, I discussed the State Department's plan to establish 3 federally funded research and development centers, FFRDCs. Industry was puzzled by this move because of the nature of State Department's requirements. Facilitate public-private collaboration for numerous activities related to diplomacy and modernization. Well, here with the State Department's view, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Acquisition and Senior Procurement Executive, Michael Derrios. Mr. Derrios, good to have you in studio.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Let's begin at the beginning. FFRDCs, you have a RFQ out now for 3 of them. Tell us the purpose here.
Sure, and actually I'll clarify. It's actually not an RFQ. We're not quite there to that part of the process yet. So this is the federal register process where we have a 90-day clock. We're taking in public comments during the period, and then at the end of that process, we'll be putting out an RFP. I want to stress that point because I think that that's probably something that industry and trade associations should think about. So what you see right now in those very broad-scoped buckets, if you will, in that notice is really just, again, broad language that describes what the centers would do in an R&D environment for the mission set. The specific requirements are going to be contained in that RFP at the end of the public comment period.
But at first glance, you think of FFRDCs for scientific-related agencies looking for partners, typically nonprofits, the MITREs and so forth of the world, to do research in scientific, technical areas. State Department is loosey-goosey diplomacy and getting along with people, advising military. So give us the vision here.
I'm so glad that you actually mentioned that, Tom. I think that a lot of people don't actually know about the real robustness of the mission set. When you think about R&D and what, well, actually, let me start here. We use FFRDCs today. This is not a new thing for us. We're already leveraging FFRDCs through other agencies, so Treasury, DHS, et cetera. What's new for us is wanting to sponsor agreements with FFRDCs for the first time directly. So the usage of FFRDCs is definitely not new for the department, and that's because we absolutely have requirements that fit that space. If you think about diplomatic security or INL, international narcotics and law enforcement, we also have a bureau focused on paramilitary affairs. We actually have an Office of Science and Technology. So the mission set is actually much broader than I think a lot of people realize. A lot of folks kind of associate the bigger bureaus like consular affairs, which would also have, I think, some requirements that would fit in this space, or diplomatic security, formerly known as IRM. There are a variety of areas across the mission set that I think would benefit from direct usage of FFRDCs. And just to kind of peel back the layer of the onion a little bit more, we're trying to solve for 3 problems. Essentially, it's scope, it's sealing, and it's expedited access. When we leverage FFRDCs through other agencies, we have to use the interagency process for that. So there's a lot of documentation that goes into that.
A lot of bureaucracy.
Absolutely. Oftentimes we are challenged with trying to fit our scope into the nature of their vehicles, make sure that it's a clean fit. In some cases, that could mean that we are cutting our requirements to try to fit into their box, if you will. And then the other piece of it is sealing. Rightfully so, any agency is going to scrutinize the sealing on their vehicle because
the dollar sealing.
Absolutely, the dollars. They want to make sure that they can support their internal customer base and others if they do support other agencies. But they're going to protect the scope and the sealing mostly on their vehicles very tightly, as they should. We have seen where we've been kicked off of vehicles because of sealing issues, right? And then you touched on it, the bureaucracy. So getting access, just getting on the vehicle, can sometimes be a very elongated process. You're talking about interagency documents that have to be signed on both sides. Again, there's that negotiation about the scope and the sealing, and sometimes it could be months before we're actually able to tap into one of the vehicles. So by issuing direct sponsoring agreements, we're trying to solve for those 3 issues. And most importantly, I would say, structure agreements with FFRDCs that are very unique and tailored to what we need.
We're speaking with Michael Derrios. He's Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Acquisition and the Senior Procurement Executive. And for the FFRDC types of requirements that could be filled that way, where do your demand signals come from? Is it from those areas you mentioned, diplomatic security, paramilitary office?
Yeah, great question. Frankly, I think a variety of the bureaus in the department would be users. I've been contacted twice in the last month from offices that are asking, "Hey, Mike, is it ready to go yet?" We're actually nowhere near it being ready to go yet. That's an indication of how much interest there is. And we obviously we looked at how much usage we have today through the interagency process. We've done some pulsing, so we know that there's definitely a demand signal. I think there's a variety of organizations that could use it. So the benefit of an FFRDC arrangement is that it gives us the ability to enter into a kind of trusted relationship with a nonprofit organization, and the FAR actually encourages us to have a long-term relationship. And also, it's the ability to share information and data that we can't always share with for-profit companies for a variety of reasons.
Because that was one of my questions. Are some of these things, could they ordinarily be done by some of the big broad-based contractors, the Lightoses or the SAICs of the world?
Sure, yeah. So we're going to be governing the process very tightly. We're going to establish an apparatus to make sure that as requirements come in, we're vetting those and that we know that they're a good fit, number one, for R&D work. And then the customer, is actually wanting to use the right center within the construct. And then 3, is this a fit for industry? There's actually 2 key words when you look at FAR Part 35 and the policy that describes FFRDCs. Actually, 2 key words. It talks about whether or not industry can as effectively do the work. I think those 2 words actually offer us a lot of broad latitude to make that determination. I'm not a requirements owner, but I'm going to illustrate, potential requirement for you, right, to try to explain that. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possible for diplomatic security to come to us and say, "Hey, we're interested in R&Ding some security solutions," right? And maybe we would want to feed an FFRDC threat information that we couldn't necessarily share with a for-profit company, right, to help us develop and prototype something unique for diplomatic security. You could say the same thing for potentially cyber missions across the department. A variety of different organizations kind of, collectively own that. Intel and INR, intelligence. There could be a need to...
Yeah, I was wondering about the paramilitary, thinking about something that's kind of been wiped off of the front pages, so to speak, and that's what's going on in Haiti. Unfortunately, the nation is focused on the president's mental acuity or whatever that might be, instead of issues like Haiti, which I think is still festering.
Yes, and the State Department is very actively involved in the situation with Haiti. Can't speak on the broader issue you raised, but definitely, whether it's study...
But just dealing with that weird situation where you have
right.
a government that has a rival that's as powerful as the government in this kind of distributed paramilitary situation.
Right, and the ability to possibly tap into an FFRDC that could offer some very technical knowledge and help us study a problem set and potentially propose alternative approaches to addressing something, right? I mean, that's the kind of work that we're talking about. So the need is absolutely there. I would say to trade associations and our industry partners, bear with us, take a look at the RFP when it comes out, and offer a little bit of trust. We are going to put a very tight governance process on this. And if something is a much better fit for industry, we're going to go in that direction.
Sure. And how do you budget for this? Because in some sense, an FFRDC functions in almost like an IDIQ mode.
Right.
And so you have to know what your ceiling is, what State Department's ceiling would be, without knowing how much, once it's established, people could come running and saying, "Hey, we need this and that done."
No, that's a fantastic point. So my policy shop is actually doing all of the outreach today to build the statement of objectives, and then we're pulsing the department to figure out what we think those requirements might look like over a 5-year period. And the way that FFRDCs work is we're required to actually examine the usage after a 5-year period and determine whether or not it makes sense to continue on with that relationship. But yeah, we're definitely wanting to pulse right now to figure out what the ceiling should be set at for these vehicles, because you're right, they are IDIQs. it's not a matter of forward funding anything. We're going to fund at the task order level as requirements come in. But we definitely are trying to do that pulsing across the department today to figure out what the demand signal will be in terms of potential dollars.
All right. So any other great procurement initiatives we should know about from state?